You're welcome. So this is Heidi Muyeso-Kunzman with the Northeast Regional Center for Rural Development and the Community and Regional Development Program at Cornell University. And on behalf of my colleagues at the Northeast Regional Center, I'm very pleased to have you on, Robbie, and to have Jenny and Pat with us today. It's something that I've been wanting to feature for a while since I learned about what they were doing. If you're new to the Highlight series, Robbie, it's designed to increase the visibility of research and extension activities throughout the Northeast that are designed to strengthen rural communities and support community and economic development. And it's really a goal of the center to be able to help build awareness of these activities and do so with the goal of catalyzing collaboration among those of us working in the area. So again, we have Pat McGill, who's the executive director of the Westside Mainstreet program, and Jenny Fertig, who is a program leader for community and economic development with the West Virginia State University Extension Service, and she's also a member of the Northeast Regional Center's Technical Advisory Committee. So we're very pleased to have them both again. And in terms of logistical details, before I turn it over to them, I can send you a link, Robbie, if you want to have a copy of the presentation. It'll take me just a second. I'll do it once they get going, and that way you're it and use it as you're going. It'll be as a PDF. We encourage questions and comments, and because you are our one in the audience, if you have a point of clarification, let us know. We want to make sure you're with us as we go along. We'll take that right there. And in addition to that, Jenny and Pat have put in points throughout the presentation to take questions, and then we'll hopefully have time for more at the end. So again, it's recorded, and assuming that we don't have technical difficulties, that we stay recorded, we will be posting it on the Northeast Regional Center for Rural Development website. So one thing I always say with every webinar I do is to expect an occasional technical glitch. It just seems to be part of the process at times. So we'll hope not. We hope we've got them all out of the way, although Jenny tells me that it's her, so we know what the problem is. Just teasing, Jenny. Okay, Robbie, do you have any questions before we get going? And Pat and Jenny, are you all set?
We're here.
Okay, good. So we'll get started then.
Morning, Robbie. We have a somewhat informal presentation for you. So we've got some slides, but we also have a lot of time built in for discussion. So if any time along the way you're not clear on what we're talking about, give us a shout and we'll stop and try to provide some further clarification for you. We're going to talk about partnerships and the partnership that we have developed that we think is unique and definitely is unique within the National Mainstreet program. And I think we're going to focus on partnerships today because of what's happening in our extension world right now. It's probably never as important as it is right now to look at ways to develop partnerships because of the tight fiscalness that we're going through. Budget cuts, most every state is experiencing massive layoffs, changes in funding strategies. So it's really important that we look for ways to leverage our dollars. There's different kinds of partnerships, and we're involved at the university at the basic level, which would be co-programming or being used for delivery of services or partnering with other folks to deliver services for us. But what we're going to talk about today is a more sophisticated and formal partnership in which the programs are hosted. We call it an embedded program. And you'll see on our slides, Pat's going to help me with that. Definitely don't want to touch the computer. We're going to talk about an embedded program, and there's our definition of that. Programs that are hosted, administratively linked, and operated in conjunction with another business development, education, or community development organization. We have several embedded programs, but we are going to focus today, Pat and I are, on the Westside Mainstreet program specifically. I'll talk about the why and the how that guided this partnership, and then we'll go into some specifics on the program itself and the benefits, challenges, and lessons learned thus far. Again, Robbie, feel free to stop us and with questions, and we have a break built in, but again, we can stop at any point. All right, the why. Why did we do this? Well, we had to get a little bit of history going here. West Virginia State University was founded in 1890 as the state's historically black land-grant school. And we operated as such, along with West Virginia University, until the mid-1950s, when desegregation happened. Our status and fundings and duties and everything were transferred completely to WVU, and the state then had just one land grant program. About 11 years ago, an act of Congress, literally legislation was passed, and our extension service was reestablished. Very exciting. We had a staff of one, an extension service with a director and no other staff. Well, it was a great opportunity, just a very exciting opportunity to build something from the scratch and literally look at the programs and look at the staffing and build it according to the needs. So that's what we did. We reestablished ourselves and then sat up and determined where should be our service area. And we did that by looking at the needs of the community and thinking through literally what can we do, what should we be doing. I mean, it was that basic. What makes sense for West Virginia and for a small university with about 5,000 students to be involved in. So these are the questions that we ask ourselves. The needs of our community, how does it fit with the mission of the university? How does it fit with the mission of different organizations? How can we leverage resources? Because when we reestablished ourselves, our initial first budget was $10,000 for an extension program, literally. So we started getting an allocation, but we had to figure out how do you build upon $10,000 and how do we leverage that $10,000? So these all became questions, and then because we hadn't existed, we had to build some credibility and build some community support for the extension service to even exist. So these are the questions we asked. This is what we decided, that it made sense for us to serve the geographic area that's largely southern West Virginia and the greater Charleston area itself. Our university is located about 10 miles outside of Charleston, so it was obviously our home area. And then southern West Virginia is the furthest area away from WVU, who has an excellent extension service, but the southern area was probably maybe slightly lesser served than the northern area where they were located. So it seemed like it would make sense for us to focus in an area where they were not as heavily saturated. Then we looked at what kind of programming, and we decided we should go ahead and set up programmatically the standard 4-H, family consumer science, ag natural resources, and the CED program area, the community and economic development. So once that decision was made, who were we going to target to work with? Again, this was all after this analysis, and decided that we should probably, as a HBCU, as a historically black school, we should be working with the underserved, the minority, low income, both rural and urban. All right, so we know where we're going in general. We had to figure out what was our mission, and this became, through staff meetings and so on, the agreed upon mission for our community and economic development program. Can't be all things to all people, so we spent probably a day, figuring out what is the greatest need for this particular program area to focus on, and this is what we came up with. Developing sustainable communities and entrepreneurs through direct community outreach, strategic partnerships, and resource development. And notice the strategic partnerships. I mean, we very much recognized that we weren't going to be able to do this alone. We needed to build upon what was going on in the state already and try to strengthen it. And then resource development, again, talking back that we had very limited budgets. We were going to have to leverage. So this became our CED mission. Then what? Now we're starting to figure out, we've got a mission, we know where we're going to be working, what are we going to do specifically? We started having meetings with stakeholders, looking again at the needs of the areas, and then we created a strategic plan. Then we went ahead following the strategic plan and looked for partners and complementary programs to work with. All right, this was important to know that looking for those partnerships led us to the Westside Neighborhood Association, which was very, very, very active in revitalizing a section of the capital area of Charleston that had been once very, very thriving and was now known as crime haven, drug haven, just very blighted area comparative to what it had been in the past. And the Westside Neighborhood Association was very actively pursuing the development of a Mainstreet program to complement the Mainstreet program on the other side of town that was having great success with their program. At the same time, I was looking for ways for us to service this area and had opened a HUD-funded economic development center on the west side. So this appeared to be a possible mission fit for us again. So what do we do next? It looked like a possibility, so I jumped on the opportunity to go to the National Mainstreet Conference in Albuquerque and just quietly sat in the back for 4 days and looked at what was this program. You know, what's their approach? What do they do? How do they support it? What is this? I'd seen it in action, obviously, on the East End, but really didn't have the specifics on the program. So came back from that conference and thought, yes, this definitely, I mean, their goals and missions are the same as ours. Their goals and missions are compatible. Why don't we see whether or not we could partner with the Westside Neighborhood Association? So I went to the university administration to see whether or not we could get some buy-in for a partnership development. And then beyond that, went to the state and local folks to see if they would support us, because we needed some financial funding to be able to make this happen. All right, all that was successful, and the neighborhood association was very agreeable to coming on board with the university, and the state Mainstreet office was also very supportive. So we developed a memorandum of understanding. And within that MOU, we covered the things like the funding, the employment of the staff, the terms, literally spelling out everything that was going to drive this relationship with us. And then we hired an extension agent, which is Pat, that's going to talk to you here in a few minutes, to serve as the Mainstreet program director. But because we were part of a Mainstreet program, they have their own operational guidelines that's required for the establishment of a program, of a Mainstreet program, and that included having an internal board of directors. We needed to do that. I mean, even though the university has its own board of directors, and even though we have a board of advisors, and we know all the administrative things that are in place with the university, to be a Mainstreet program, there are guidelines, and that included the board of directors. So the important point is that you can, when you look at these partnerships, you've got to be able to analyze whether or not your set of guidelines can fit with their set of guidelines, or how you can make it work. We then eventually developed an operations manual, even though the university, again, we have our own, and we incorporated our rules and regulations into another operations manual that was specific to the Mainstreet, that kind of blended the two. They were always in compliance with our rules and regulations, but also in compliance with what is theirs. So my recommendation, you'll see it there in bright, keep it formal, keep it formal. When you're trying to develop some kind of a partnership like this, it's better to spend the time and energy hammering out that MOU and then hammering out the operations manual. We were slower getting the operations manual developed. We didn't do it at the beginning, and I really regret that. I can't stress that enough, that, we created it in response to issues. We could have eliminated some of the issues if we would have created the operations manual to begin with.
Jenny, can I just ask a question directly related to that. So, do you think you could have foreseen most of those issues had you had that manual in the beginning? Or it just strikes me that sometimes there's a balance between stuff that emerges and stuff that is more obvious.
I think we probably could have eliminated some of it. Okay. Some of what happened was just general employee types of issues, but some of it was clarity on who signs off on what. You have a board of governors, you have me in an administrative role, you have a president of a board. Who does this person report to? And I think Pat will talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes when we get into the direct program. But you can see where that might cause a problem for the employee to be the person in the middle between who signs off on what,
yes,
and how many people do I have to report to, and I think it just needed to be completely clarified. In this situation, do this. In this situation, do that. Here is you've got use of university funds. You've got use of funds that are not tied to the university that are through the Mainstreet program, through program income generation. How do I deal with those? Who oversees those funds? Those kinds of operational things that we just hadn't quite given enough thought to in the beginning. We just kind of, we thought through the broader. I mean, I really felt like we had the broader handled, but the specifics, no. And so my, my advice is to definitely then sit down and, be happy to share our operations manual with anybody that would like it, but definitely try to think through the actual processes of this happening so that it would make it easier on everybody.
Great, thank you. And it looks like Robbie is typing as well, and so maybe while we're waiting to hear it, he said, how hard was it to sell this idea to the university administration? And yes, he would like a copy of both the MOU and the operations manual, if that's possible.
Yes.
Great, and his email address we have, so I'll send that to you after the session.
Okay. We were blessed. I really, really want to say that. We were blessed in that we had a blank slate and very, I don't know if young is the right word, but very flexible administration who understood that we had to be, looking at this probably a little bit differently. So not as difficult as other folks might have it. And again, because we jumped all those hoops, really looked at the program itself and looked at what we were going to generate out of this partnership and looked at the mission fit. And I mean, I really worked that angle on it. And the Westside Mainstreet Association was very strong, very organized group of citizen-led, folks that were trying to make changes over here. And, I think that gave it a lot of credibility as well, that we had a built-in stakeholder group that was going to guide this process. So I think the university saw that as a win-win and a win.
I have to say, I've just appreciated your emphasis throughout this part of the presentation on really thinking through what the mission of the university is, your target audience, your target area, and then really making sure as you looked for partners that it was a good fit. Because I think, and I was in a meeting yesterday of a bunch of higher education institutions in New York, and these are folks that are working on community and economic development, both public and private institutions. And as we were talking about best practices and some of the challenges and stuff, and one of the things that came up a theme a couple times was just mission creep, that when we're partnering with people and serving in kind of a community development role or serving community development programs, that it's really, really important to remember what it is that we do as higher ed institutions and what role we play to keep in mind that fit. Otherwise, we're stepping on toes or stretching ourselves too thin, or not doing justice to what we're supposed to be doing. So
well, our CED program, and I won't belabor this, but we are probably very different if you were to look at us in relationship to maybe a more traditional CED program. We're partnered with economic development folks in county agent positions, and they co-fund, and we literally sit down with these county EDA folks and figure out economic development strategies together that we can work on. And our newest position that came on board June 1st is with a 7-county hardwood alliance zone, and we're working with them on how to realign the hardwood industry, and are trying to find that fine line of what we can do as a university and support this would be, the biggest trick, and an ongoing conversation all the time with the partners that, our function is to provide the research and the educational training and those kinds of things, and get them to understand. So,
That's great.
I'm sorry, we have a training program going on in our facility, so if you're getting some back noise.
Okay. Robbie, did that answer your question? Do you have any more before we move on? He's typing, guys, so hold just 1 minute.
Okay. We have a women's work training program going on right now. It's a women's construction training program.
Oh, neat.
They're getting ready to graduate today, so they're all pumped up.
That's great. I think so yes, you said were you also able to sell this as part of a way to keep recent grads involved in the state? So I presume recent graduates of West Virginia State University.
I truthfully didn't think about that, honestly.
So maybe a follow-up is, are students involved in the program at all?
I'll let Pat answer that. Probably not as much as we would hope. We wrote a grant 2 years ago to incorporate the School of Business with her more, and that's probably our less successful, honestly. I would say not as much. Part of us, the university, regaining its land grant status is also changing the mission of the university itself from a teaching to an outreach, and we're working on that. But that's a different kind of a mindset for the, faculty that were there existing prior. So I think probably the infiltration of the university itself from the academic side with us is probably going to grow, but is not as strong as we would want it to be at this point.
So it's really part of a paradigm shift that you're working through.
Oh my gosh, immensely. Immensely. I mean, we were a liberal arts college, and now we're a research land grant school again. In blink of your eye.
Yeah.
So it's a definite shift in thinking.
Okay. So Robbie, I hope that helps, and what I want to encourage us to do is we'll move on to Pat, and then we can come back and get into this more if we haven't covered it. And Robbie says yes, thank you. So go ahead.
Okay, this is Pat, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the experience that we've had on the west side of Charleston with the Mainstreet program. The Mainstreet program is a part of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and the Mainstreet program is one of 12 Mainstreet programs in West Virginia. Charleston currently has 2 programs. We have an East End and a West Side program. And both of these programs are really working with trying to do preservation and downtown revitalization, which is essentially the mission for the Mainstreet program. The west side of Charleston is a 2.5-mile long Main Street corridor, which is a little outside of what the normal Main Street is. Main Street is traditionally a couple of blocks long. I long for, I love seeing these little other Main Street programs that have a couple of blocks that they work on and think, wow, wouldn't that be great? Our corridor is pretty much divided into 3 distinct areas. Part of what we did last year is to develop a marketing analysis to help us look at what kinds of programs or people we should be trying to attract to the Main Street. And the economic analyst recommended that we divide our area up into 3 areas. West side of Charleston is predominantly a low-income area. There's a large population below the poverty level, but then there's also a large population of very affluent. And so what you have is what we know here is the hills versus the flats. The flats are traditionally the lower income, the more diverse population, and the poorer infrastructure. The hill areas are usually much more affluent, more residential. It's an urban area. We're the capital city of West Virginia, 55,000 population. The west side area has about 19,000 people, so we're a pretty good population, or a portion of Charleston's population. As Jenny mentioned before, the west side has been pretty much neglected since the 70s. It was an area where there was a high vacancy rate among the businesses. There were definitely some difficulties with crime, had a pretty poor image, public image, and that whole blighted area was something that was really contributing to the inability to attract new businesses to the area on the west side. Our mission is revitalization and restoration of the downtown business district on Charleston's west side. The west side of Charleston at one time was a very thriving and vibrant area of Charleston. We've got one historic district, the Elk City area, which was recently gotten designated. And a lot of these buildings that you see here are buildings that were built in the 30s and the 40s, but unfortunately there are certain areas of the business district that still need a lot of work. And so that's pretty much where we've been focusing our activities. The West Side Mainstreet program has pretty much graduated from the Neighborhood Association when we were first formed. We are now our own 501c3. We work in conjunction and have a memorandum of understanding with the university. But as Jenny mentioned, we also have an independent board of directors. And although I'm employed by the university, I report both to the director, program leader of extension, as well as to my 16-member board of directors. We look at the Mainstreet principles, and pretty much we're a community and volunteer-driven organization. I'm the only staff. My office is off campus and is on the business district corridor. We have probably 100 to 150 volunteers who work with us on any number of projects. And part of what the Mainstreet program stresses is what they call a 4-point approach. Organization, design, economic restructuring, and promotion. So we'll go a little bit more into those in just a minute. But the Mainstreet program is one that is incremental and it's comprehensive. And that's the most difficult thing, I think, for volunteers to get a grasp on. They want to see things happen very quickly, and it's not a quick fix program. What we do is we build on what the existing assets are in the community. We work with other private entities and public partnerships to begin to try to do this revitalization and redevelopment. And all of that takes time. So what we look for in these 4 committees is we will have a work plan for each of these committees that has maybe 2 or 3 projects that they work on for that particular year, but that program or that project may run over multiple years because the thing that I tell volunteers often is, this deterioration did not get this way overnight, and we're not going to cure it overnight. So that's the most difficult thing.
Pat and Jenny, I just want to let you know too, Robbie just let me know that he is also a Mainstreet manager, so he has a good sense of this. But I explained to him that we're also recording for others to see, so that we'll try not to go into too much detail on stuff that will be obvious to him, but do want to give an overview of it. So I am a
And Robbie is a she.
Yeah,
I
oh, you
just
did
saw her
find
message.
it. Good. Okay. Robbie, I'm sorry. I've made the assumption the whole time.
Thank you, Robbie. That's great to know. This is not new information to you, but it may be something that other people who are looking at models for community development might want to look at. So as we said, the Main Street principles, what we look at is we have 4 different committees of volunteers. The organization committee specifically looks at trying to garner resources for the organization and to provide educational resources. We're looking specifically at building the organization. The organization committee looks at fundraising, they look at membership, they look at things like that you need to grow an organization. The design committee is specifically looking at rehabilitating the environment. It is building street beautification, green space, things that make the district look nice. Under our design committee, we have things like facade grant programs where we assist business owners with helping them with grants to help revitalize and make the outside of their buildings look better. That improves the overall look of the environment and makes it look a lot nicer for being able to attract new developers. The 2 buildings that you see there are buildings that were built. Well, the one on the lower end was a 1930s building that was pretty much dilapidated, and the owner has made that into a thriving business. Actually, my office is in this building. The building at the top was actually 2 dilapidated buildings and a vacant lot in between, and the Charleston Housing Authority took this on and built new exteriors, revitalized the inside, and built a little connector on the vacant lot so that it looks like one grand facade. So they've really done a great job with beginning the revitalization in that particular block, which is in the same block as those other 2 buildings that you saw on the previous slide. The 3rd committee is what is called economic restructuring. It's essentially business development. The job of this group is to fill vacant buildings, to work with business owners, to bring in developers. They work specifically with trying to establish business incentives, loan programs, capital improvement funds, making sure that businesses or potential businesses have resources that they need or things that will encourage them to relocate to the west side. We're currently a little farther behind in our business development than a lot of other Main Street programs because we're relatively new. We're still in the process of developing market analysis, gathering data, getting building surveys completed, making sure that we have business directories and those sorts of things. But I think that within the next year or so, the Economic Restructuring Committee will be a lot more active. And then promotion is the 4th committee, and that job of that particular committee is to make sure that people know about the West Side, present a positive view of the area, and make it something that will bring people into the downtown area. Promotion is one of those things that we probably do a little bit better because it's a more fun activity. We've got a couple of things coming up next weekend that have developed into pretty big community activities. We have what we call a West Side Wiener Dog Race, and we have an old-fashioned ice cream social. And these are free events that we offer to the community and generally have 2,000 to 3,000 people who show up for these events. So it is a nice opportunity to get people from the community to start interacting with one another. As far as funding, if we look at where we are for funding of the West Side Main Street, as Jenny mentioned, I am actually employed as an extension agent through the university, but a portion of my salary also has to be gathered from one of our so we have funding from the city of Charleston. We're very fortunate in that the current mayor is a big supporter of the Mainstreet program. And so we get an annual allotment from the city. Right now, that's currently about 18% of our budget. The 22% comes from the West Virginia State University Extension Service. We get about 15% from private donations, membership, special events, those sorts of things. But right now, a lot of our funding, particularly for our programs and projects, is coming from grants. I would like that to be a little less. It's always difficult when you depend on grant funding for programs, because when that goes away, then your project goes away. So the 36% that we're currently getting for grants, I would like to at some point see that become a little less than what it currently is. There are some strategic advantages to being partnered. I think I'm the only program, the only website, or the only Mainstreet program in West Virginia that is partnered with a university. So that makes us somewhat different in that we are a little bit more stable as far as being able to have at least some guaranteed fiscal support for a period of time. It also gives us some established name recognition. We, being affiliated with the West Virginia State University Extension Service, offers some name recognition in the community, particularly because it is a land-grant university and because we have such a diverse population on the west side. So I think that certainly is a distinct advantage. Organizational resources, of course, being able to look at collaboration with the academic world. As Jenny said, we've been less successful in being able to get students involved, but we do have access to other programs within the university and to other resources within the university that we probably would not have were we not partnered with a university. And then funding opportunities. Because we are 501c3, we do qualify or can do a lot of grant writing on our own, but it's also a distinct advantage, particularly with federal programs, to be able to jointly do a grant through the university in conjunction with a 501c3. You might have a lot better opportunities for getting a bigger grant. We've been pretty successful in getting, quite frankly, transportation funds. We're in the process of doing a 5-phase streetscape on the west side, which is replacement of all of our sidewalks, new lighting, utility relocation, that sort of thing. And so most of those grants are coming from the Department of Transportation and the Federal Highways Administration. And so being able to, partner with other city agents or local governments or universities, I think makes it a much stronger application when you're applying for federal funding. As far as successes, I've been with the program now about 3.5 years. As I said, I think we're probably just now coming into the point where we're beginning to start seeing some progress with the program. It takes a while. It's, as I said, incremental, and it doesn't happen quickly. But we have been able to see at least 16 new businesses relocated to the west side, about 120 new jobs. This is something that at one time we had about a 20% vacancy rate on the west side. That is significantly less. I don't know what it is right now because I haven't gone through and collected all of our vacant buildings, because we've got a couple that are coming down. But the vacancy rate is much less. We've brought in over $700,000 in private and public funding for projects on the west side. We're seeing things like the new public park that we established on some vacant lots. We've established a new public art project last year. for our merchants who are looking at renovating their properties. We've had over $7 million in new buildings and infrastructure improvements and facade renovations to existing buildings just along the business corridor. And because we have such a high business population, we've got about 120 businesses just along the West Side Main Street corridor. That $7 million is going directly back into the economy. So that really has been helpful with revitalization of the West Side. We've developed a master streetscape plan. As I said, we're going to complete that probably hopefully within the next 4 years. We've got the first phase underway, and we're currently in the process of making application for the second and third phases of that project. Most of the sidewalks on the west side have not been replaced since the early 70s, so some of the areas are pretty dilapidated. We also do a lot of things as far as community events. As I said, we got community events coming out that are free to the public that kind of just foster a sense of place among the west side. We do holiday decorations, street banners, those kinds of things just to encourage people to start thinking about the place that they're living and working, and to make it seem like a much smaller community. We really have got a pretty motivated group of people on the west side. Anytime we have a focus group or a community meeting, the one thing that people always cite is that they are generally west siders, and if they're not west siders, they come back often to the west side. So they still have a real sense of community here. I think as we begin to get more entrepreneurs and small businesses along the corridor, I think we're going to see some real changes as far as shopping patterns, trying to attract people back to the downtown area and away from the big box stores that have developed outside of Charleston. There, of course, are challenges with having a partnership program. It's difficult sometimes to create a shared identity. I constantly struggle with trying to make sure that the university gets cited in newspapers. It's kind of old news. We generate a good deal of positive publicity just simply because we're doing things out in the community. And although reporters know that it is a part of the university, that rarely gets printed. So it's really difficult sometimes to reinforce that, yes, we are a part of West Virginia State University. Also, the challenge is working with two boards. As Jenny mentioned before, operationally, it sometimes becomes difficult because the Mainstreet is a pretty structured program. There are certain things that you have to do in order to be a Mainstreet program, but that might not mesh very well with university programs. So trying to negotiate those differences between Mainstreet and university policies sometimes can be a challenge. And then sometimes working with two bosses. I report to Jenny as the program leader for CED, but I also report to my Mainstreet board. And it sometimes is difficult to get volunteers to understand that, there are certain things that I have to do in order to comply with the mission of Extension or what we plan to do through CED that may not particularly mesh with what they would like to do through Mainstreet. So sometimes it is a challenge to serve two bosses, the university and the Mainstreet board. We think that there are certain ways that you can look at trying to make sure that you have a successful program. If you plan to look at something like utilizing the Mainstreet and the University Extension Service models, first of all, you have to be able to go through your state Mainstreet program. The state Mainstreet program is part of our development office. It is a great resource for us. It is also the certification organization for our Mainstreet program. mentioned, you have to have a clear memorandum of understanding to make sure that everybody understands what the role is. That's really, really important. It's difficult to go back after you started something and kind of change it. So having a clearly articulated MOU at the outset is very important. There has to be a two-way communication of goals. The Mainstreet board has to be able to articulate what they want to accomplish through the university, and the university in turn has to make sure that the board knows what their goals are as well. There can't be hidden agendas. That probably is more difficult to accomplish with a volunteer board than working with professionals. Each group has to recognize that there are differences in the program, but there are generally ways that you can work that out. One thing that we have seen is the don't play manager in the middle. Boards have to understand that as part of the deal that we have with the university is there are certain things that we have to do, and they can't micromanage that. And then have a strong presence of the host organization. It's really important for the university to be, the extension service to be visible whenever we're having these community events. One of the things that we need to be able to reinforce with the community is that this is something that makes a strong partnership. It's something that is supported by the Land Grant Institute, and it's something that makes our program a lot stronger. So making sure that we have a strong presence in the community is real important to our success as a program. Questions?
Robbie, do you have any questions? I have a couple, and it looks like you are typing, so while we're waiting, I just wondered if you guys work with the other Mainstreet programs.
Yes, we have quarterly meetings that we get together for not only training but also shared opportunities. The East End program and I work very closely together. We both have very similar goals. We share programs, we share projects. We do joint projects together just to make sure that whatever we're doing is going to enhance Charleston's revitalization. We're certainly not in competition with each other.
That's great. And how about, does West Virginia University also, State University also partner with those? So is that through you, Pat, or is there actual other research and extension of those other programs as well?
I know WVU works with the Morgantown Mainstreet program. It's a very strong program. It's been in existence for about 25 years. So they're the longest or the oldest Mainstreet program in West Virginia. And the university is a big part of working with Morgantown Mainstreet because they're like right next door to the university.
Great.
Were you asking, does West Virginia State University partner with the East End?
Yeah, I was wondering that also. I actually had both of those, so I didn't say it right in the beginning, but I was wondering if the university, West Virginia State University, also supports the other ones in ways, or if you see that as, Pat, you being the link between the two.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
No, that's okay, because you answered what I was going to follow up with anyway. But,
okay.
So we're okay.
The East End program has been embedded with the Charleston Area Alliance, which is a kind of a mix of a Chamber of Commerce, a local economic development group, and they have been a part of that alliance since their inception. They are currently in the process of becoming their own 501c3 and becoming independent. So they are actually going to be working probably most closely with the city of Charleston. Jenny can address how some of the other extension agents and some of our other programs are working with Mainstreet.
I would offer on the East End that our emphasis area as far as the university is concerned concerned is on the youth. And we do have a large program on the East End at the East End Resource Center and do a lot of youth programming. So it's not directly supportive of the Mainstreet effort, but it's supportive of, more of the
other related initiatives, it sounds
exactly.
Like. Great. Exactly. And that is a great lead-in. Robbie asked, what resources of the university and extension have been the most beneficial for you?
I think for me, probably has been the salary support and the benefit support. Most of my Mainstreet colleagues do not have health benefits, and that's something that has been a big help. And in this particular program, in that I don't have to worry about going out and finding health benefits. That's not something that has to come out of our salary. I think the other big benefit is being able to have access to resources in other departments, although we have not used them probably as much as we probably could, knowing that they're there and that we can call on other departments or other people within the university, I think is a big asset as well.
I would also add probably the communications department, who can help prepare signage, which we don't have anything on the screen right now that really depicts it, but they're good for designing brochures, designing the marketing pieces, designing advertisements, that kind of thing. So I think that's also been a help. The East End has approached us to help them develop, and I'm trying to figure out how we can do that, how we can help them develop their brochure to make it look slick like Pat's. She didn't want to talk about this programming so much. She didn't want it to be the focus of it, but I have to toot her horn just a little bit. You're looking at some pictures there from where it says free ice cream. Doesn't look so much from just that photo, but you have to know that we're planning that for next weekend and anticipating 2,000 people at that event. That's unheard of. That's a tremendous pat on the back community event. They had 1,500 people there last year. We're planning for 2,000 this year. That's getting people to the area of Charleston that's people normally drive around, not to. So this is really exciting. Also, the other event there, the Wiener Dog Race. I don't know, Pat, how many people come to that?
We had 2,000 there last year. We had about 100 dogs race.
Wow.
They're coming from Florida. They're coming from people are driving from all over to race their dogs. So I know we don't really want to talk so much about the events, but that's part of it. It's getting people to come there and recognize and pass by these businesses and maybe stop in and just start to feel comfortable on the west side. The event on the top is an October West. It's a street fair that Pat puts on. We had how many last year?
Oh gosh, we ran out of food, so it was over 2,000. That generally generates about $10,000 in funding for the program. So it's a fundraiser, our major fundraiser for the year.
But it's a street fair. We close off the street and have a street fair. So, in the last photo down there on the right, I definitely wanted to highlight that. That's a community involved project that those are tiles that lots and lots of people have made. Those are the small. Explain it, Pat.
They're 4x4 tiles. We went around to schools, to community centers, to senior programs. We have over 400 tiles that were painted by members of the community. The things in the metal were painted by a local professional artist, but the tiles were painted by 400 members of the community. One of our local businesses fired and glazed all of the tiles, and then we used local artists to mount and put that piece of art up in the bus stop on the west side along Washington Street, and it's the first piece of public art on the west side.
Large retaining wall.
Yeah.
That was just an ugly retaining wall, and now it's beautiful. And 400 folks in the community got to participate in that. So anyway, I wanted to pat on the back while I could.
I would just follow that up with, and it looks like Robbie's typing again, so we'll get a question. But when you said, we don't want to emphasize the events themselves too much, but my question is, because it seems like having that many people come in really fantastic, and are you seeing, like, is there any way that you're tracking returns on investment? So are businesses open that day and you're seeing people? I don't know what kind of businesses there are there, so maybe on a Saturday it's not like you're going to go to see a lawyer who might be located in that area, but it just seems like a big deal to have people coming through, and that there must be, when you think about economic development and your primary mission, that you need some return on that investment.
We have sort of a strange business mix on the west side. We have niche businesses. We have probably 5 or 6 areas where people just come to that store because it's that store. So I think what we've seen is those businesses are open on Saturday when these people are in town. There are increased people in the area. We could do better. One of the things that my colleagues at the National Mainstreet programs always complain about is that they organize these events and then merchants complain because there's no parking, that there are people in the streets, that, make these people go away kinds of things. It's a real challenge sometimes to get businesses to understand that, they have a real stake in this. We're creating the event, we're bringing the people there. Your part is you need to be open, you need to have sidewalk sales, you need to get, people in your store. You need to figure out ways to utilize those people who are there. And that's still a challenge, and it's not unique to our area.
Kat, are you doing any training around that, like how it can return to you? Or
yeah, we've done a couple of seminars. We've done things like window displays. We've brought in consultants to help them, jazz up their windows to make them look better. We have seen some improvement from that particular aspect. We've done some webinars. We've not had real good participation with that because a lot of these businesses are family-owned businesses where everybody works in the store. Mm-hmm. And so unless you can do something at 7 o'clock in the morning and or like 5 o'clock in the afternoon after they close the shop, you really can't get them to participate in business development kinds of things. So I use a lot of business newsletters. I do an email frequently. I try to do it once a week, but I don't always get around to it. And what I do in that is I take things that tips for retail, things that you could do to improve traffic in your store, those kinds of things, put them into an email and email them out to our businesses, and hopefully they're reading those.
And it sounds like a webinar is a nice idea, because if they can't be on during the actual time, go at that 7 o'clock hour and check things out. So that's a great idea. I wanted to be sure, it sounded like you were able to see the sidebar, but I just wanted to make sure that you saw Robbie's comments.
We're still not seeing the sidebar, but we see a little pop-up occasionally.
Okay, so I'm going to read this to you. She said, "It sure looks like you've done a great deal in a short period of time. Events are important, especially if you have a community that is not accustomed to coming together. Here in New Hampshire, we are trying to reestablish our state coordinating program, and we feel UNH, our land grant, is a potential partner for us. Glad to hear how it works for you." And she also said, "Oh, Pat, just went through that whole deal about getting the businesses to understand that we can bring people downtown, but they have to get them over the threshold." Grr.
Yeah, we're in the same boat, Robbie. So, and you're not alone. I mean, that's the focus of there's a session every time it's at the National Mainstreet Conference on, trying to get retailers to understand their role in this whole development aspect, but incremental.
And so I have 11:35, and I don't want to hold you guys on anymore. Robbie, if you have any other questions, please send it in. And I wanted to make sure that you saw Pat and Jenny's contact information so that you guys can stay in touch. And again, Pat and Jenny, I will send you the email address that Robbie shared with me so that you can send that MOU and the
operations manual.
Yes. so I'll make sure you get that so you can pass that on to her. So Robbie's typing one more time, and then. So thank you both, Pat and Jenny. Again, I'm really sorry that we didn't have more people on, but I will be marketing this. I think what I'm going to do, we just developed a list of folks working in this area that attended the NACDEP meeting, and we've been thinking about ways to reach out to them and use that to reach out to others. So I'm going to send them a list of the webinars that we've done over the last year, and this will be included there with both a description and a link to the recording. So. And Robbie said, thanks so much. Our motto up here is steal with zeal.
Sounds good.
Looks like it's an important connection. So
thank you, Heidi.
Thank you all, and we'll be in touch shortly.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.